Uh, she's from State University of New York, Schenectady. She's a reference and instruction librarian there, and she will be presenting on peer specialist and the library. And so there will be question and answer at the end of presentation. And please also write your question in the chat, raise your hand, and we'll get you there. Okay. Please welcome Sine.
Hi, just 1 second while I get the presentation up. Okay. Hi, I'm Sine Rofofsky. I'm sharing about peer specialists and the library, and I just hit the wrong spot. I'm so sorry. This was previously shared in, I'm sorry, my screen just decided not to let me see something. There we go. Okay. So this presentation was recently done at the Peer Workforce Conference in 2023. There I presented it specifically to peer specialists, and here I'm actually presenting it towards librarians. So even though it's similar, it's actually a very different audience, very different view. I'm a certified peer specialist provisionally in New York, and I'm also a librarian. I've been a librarian since February 1998. I've worked in college, school, public, special, you name it. And the whole reason this presentation came about is because when I was doing my peer specialist training, which I'm finished in 2022, and now I'm working on becoming fully certified, I saw a lot of overlap between what a peer specialist does and what a librarian does. And it made me realize a lot of my peer specialist skills are actually coming in really handy, specifically at the reference desk and when dealing with patrons. And I thought I should probably share this with other people. Maybe there's a place for a peer specialist in libraries. So that's why this came about. So we're going to talk about introduction to the topic, defining peer specialist, what it takes to become a peer specialist, what makes a peer specialist unique, and how does this all overlap. I welcome questions throughout. I sometimes say things wrong or have a different view than someone else. So please, criticisms, critiques, questions are all welcome at any time in the chat, preferably. But if you prefer speaking, if you raise your hand, you'll be acknowledged as well. So a brief introduction. I don't know, does anyone know what a peer specialist is? I know I didn't know about it till I started needing one and working with one. So does anyone know what a peer specialist is?
This is actually my first time hearing the phrase, so I can say I do not know. I'm sorry.
Okay. I just wanted to know how in depth I should go. So a certified peer specialist works with others who also have lived experiences similar to them, and they're most familiarly seen in mental health, the VA, and substance abuse, but there are other instances. And in this specific presentation, I'm focusing on those who work with peers who have mental health issues as well. And basically, if you're a certified peer specialist, provisionally or full, you have training to share your lived experience with others to help them to navigate basically anything and everything in the world. It could be literal, just like reference librarians, we answer any question that comes up, whether it's where's the bathroom or, something really crazily in depth, like what's the difference between the Chinese and the Japanese Cinderella and how did it come about? And I need 15 scholarly resources on that in English. Certified peer specialists, we can help with how do I take the bus from here to there, to how do I navigate getting help entering an assisted living, and everything in between. In both instances, we don't offer medical, legal, or other such advice, but we can help navigate the resources and information and evaluate information. So while this doesn't really sound useful in a library, in some ways, in other ways, it's really useful. Especially, I'm going to call them interesting patrons, because I hate to call them problem patrons. But with interesting patrons, I've discovered a lot of my peer specialist training has helped me tremendously with dealing with them, and made me look back in my past and go, man, I wish I knew that stuff then. Or man, I wish there was someone I could have passed them off to who knew that stuff then, just to handle the issues, and then build that trust relationship, and then bring the patron to me with a warm handoff that this is my friend, my colleague, who can help you with your information need now that I've calmed you down and you like me. Now I can pass you off to someone else. So basically, that's this, if you want the elevator speech of this presentation, that's the elevator speech, but I'm going into a lot more detail and depth. And basically, when you're interacting with others, whether you're their peer or not, it's difficult, and learning tips from other fields can really only enhance the work in our field. In the past, I've done research on how theater training has helped being a reference librarian, how training as a teacher has helped, and this is just another field that helps librarians. And also, in this instance, might also help to have a peer specialist on staff for just because they have a different training set and might be able to connect with the patron in a different way than we can. So peer support, according to the Mental Health America, it's on the screen. I'm not going to read this to you. I'm going to assume that y'all can read it. But basically, peer supporters are also called peer specialists, community support, and there's many other terms used for it. And the people they work with are called consumers or peers. I'm going to use the word peer usually because it really is a peer-peer relationship. Unlike in the library where unfortunately the patrons kind of don't see it as a peer-peer relationship. And in my mind, that might be a way to make them more comfortable, is to make it more of a, we're on the same level, rather than, and this is nothing against librarians. We worked hard to get where we are. We worked hard to become librarians. We worked hard for our knowledge. But for me, it's a little scary even today, and I've been a librarian for years, to walk up into a new library, walk up to a desk and say, can you help me? I feel a little overwhelmed, a little scared, a little, are you judging me? But when I know that I'm going to work with a peer specialist as a mental health consumer myself, I feel a little more comfortable because I already know that we have a shared connection. And I know it's hard in a library to make that connection, or to, it's not as easy to identify that. So it's a little bit harder. So it's, again, it's not something that librarians aren't there to offer mental health support, but it's something to keep in mind. If you can build that connection, find that piece that connects you, you get a better interaction with people in general. So defining a librarian, I think we all know what a librarian is. But in this analysis that I'm doing, I'm not saying that all staff working in a library is a librarian, but research has shown that anyone coming into a library doesn't really care what your title is. They just want you to help. And so in that way, using the term library staff to include anyone who works in a library, but please know I respect librarians and I know librarians have a special skill set, and I am not demeaning that or uncounting that in any way, shape, or form. It's just that people coming in don't see the difference, especially with the growing use of mixed desks or integrated desks. They'll ask the first person that's free. They won't wait for the person with the librarian tag that's small under their in front of them. At least that's been my experience. I don't know what's been the experience at your schools. Can anyone share if that's happening where you are too?
Yeah, I mean, sorry, I want to jump in. It's basically the same. Like we kind of have to deal with a lot of like umbrella work. We are working with. I make a common joke that reference librarians are kind of like bartenders. We kind of hear everybody's problems and just kind of give advice and service towards them. So I'd say probably it's the same way around a lot of CUNY schools.
Okay, I did work and attend CUNY way back when, but I know things have changed since I left. I left in the 2010s, so it's been a while for me. So becoming a peer specialist, we know that to become a librarian, we get our master's. For academic librarianship, we often get a second master's or more. Becoming a peer specialist, specifically in New York State, you complete coursework from the Academy of Peer Specialists, New York Academy of Peer Specialists, to get your provisional license, and then you need to complete additional coursework and 2,000 hours working as a peer specialist to become a fully certified peer specialist. And we have continuing education requirements that we need to continue doing as long as we hold our license. And other states, last count, it was 41 states have similar licensing requirements. And there's a really big push for national standards. Hopefully they're coming soon. Again, there are other types of peer specialists. I'm focusing on the ones that are working in the mental health fields. So some special traits of a peer specialist. As librarians, we do often have experience as a library patron as well, but it's not always the same thing because for most of us, it's been a while since we've gone into a new, strange, unknown library where we didn't actually have the background knowledge to start the research or understand the jargon. And librarians have role-specific training towards their degree. And the same is kind of true of a peer specialist, though not at the same intensity. A peer specialist is a lot of webinars, some in-person training, some asynchronous courses. There's no thesis, no capstone project, a lot of knowledge gained and a lot of hours put in doing practicals, but it's the main thing that a peer specialist has is they have lived experience as a person with mental health concerns, as well as the training, webinars, and hands-on practice. And one thing I've always tried to practice as a librarian is to remember what it's like to be a patron and to put myself into the situation of a new library where I don't know something and try to help myself be more, not that we're not empathetic, but having recently experienced it, I realize I'm a lot more empathetic than if it was a couple of months ago when I was in a new library with some question that I was asking someone I didn't know. So I also try to take a lot of online learning or classes just to remind myself, especially working in an academic library, to remind myself what it's like to be a student and to be a patron where I don't know the staff and I'm not familiar with where I am. And I find that being more like a peer with them, to me, it feels more like I guess a more meaningful and a more successful interaction, even if we don't actually find the answer. So moving on, before I go into what's on the screen, does anyone have any questions about anything or any comments? No? Okay. Moving on. So the core values of a peer specialist, it's your option to accept the peer support, just like it's your option to accept help from a librarian or other library staff. It's peer supporters are hopeful, help librarians. We're hopeful that we can help you and that you can find what you need or find the answer. And not going to go over all these because I'll go over them in more detail one by one on the next slides. And interestingly enough, I couldn't find a specific list of the core values of a librarian that was generic, but I did find the ALA Library Bill of Rights, which talks about the library itself rather than the librarian, which was a little odd because it's giving human characteristics to a non-human thing, but was pretty close. So I using that as the basis of the comparison. So peer support is voluntary. Just as a peer specialist or peer supporter doesn't force or coerce others to use a service or a resource, we as librarians, we try not to force a patron to use a specific resource just because we like it better, or try to force a patron to accept help. I generally try not to, in either case, walk up to someone and say, "You need help. You're going to take my help." I try to, it's their choice if they want help. And at any point during the reference interaction, if they're in a session that their instructor told them they had to go to, well, they kind of should be sitting down in the classroom. But again, it's their choice to be there or not. I'm not going to tie them down. So, we respect the rights of both the peer specialists and the librarians. Respect the rights of the peer or the patron to not want to interact with ourselves or to stop the interaction at any point. I find that in the library, when I'm a solo librarian or the only person on staff, it's a little bit harder because I can't just refuse to help the person. But when there's someone else, I can do what's called a warm handoff, which, instead of just saying, "Oh, go to that person," it's like, this is, I'm not sure I can help you with this, but let me introduce you to my colleague. They may be able to help you better. This is more their strength. But as a peer specialist, I do have the right to refuse to help someone if I'm becoming uncomfortable or triggered. And that's a big difference in the library. If a topic is triggering me or making me upset, I still help the patron. And then I go in the back and I scream and cry. And then I come back out and I smile again. But that's like one of the biggest differences for me is I can stop the interaction. And one thing that is useful and that I'm trying to work more on as a librarian is recognizing when I'm uncomfortable and making sure that there's someone I can pass it off to and practicing ways that I can pass it off so that I'm not awkward in doing it. So that's kind of something, if you have colleagues that you work with, one really good thing is recognizing when you're uncomfortable, whether it's because it's out of your skill set, it's not in your quote job title, or you're just getting some weird vibe. Being able to do a handoff and practicing it in advance really helps to make it more natural for me. I don't know if you guys, any of you have ever experienced that or worked with, had that type of situation?
I can jump in. I mean, typically, if I ever have any kind of handoff, it's usually just for subject expertise. Like if I have someone who is more, knowledgeable on the physical sciences or biology or stuff like that. I am a humanities librarian, so I don't really mesh well with science and math. So I would, refer to them if I couldn't answer the question that way. So I think I'm very like used to that warm pass on that term is used. So yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, it's doing it with subject specialties is really the most common, but occasionally being aware so that you're not drained for the next person. Sometimes you don't realize that it drains you when you're working with someone that you're not comfortable with. So it's just something, to be a little aware of. If you're having any weirdness, if you can, it kind of helps. So peer supporters and librarians, we try to be hopeful. Librarians rarely, we really don't try to get too personal. Peer supporters draw on their life experience a lot more, but it's sometimes if a patron's really struggling, hearing how something's been really hard for me, especially, I've realized helps build that connection and makes them more willing to accept help. If I say, yeah, that it's really hard for me to find that too. Would you like me to show you how I learned how to make it work? Using I statements, just showing that, we're humans, that we're like in the Wizard of Oz, taking down that curtain between the people and the wizard, so that you, even though we may not think that we have that curtain up, unfortunately, people sometimes see it even if we don't. So trying to make us human and build a little bit of a bond so it's more connections. And peer specialists model recovery behaviors and are ambassadors of, recovery and everything. And librarians, we model research and other library skills, library etiquette. And we also, when we're out, hopefully we're advocating for library skills, information literacy, and libraries in all situations. So in both ways, we're hopeful that things can change, that we can help people, whether it's through recovery or through finding information. Again, information can be anything from where's the water fountain, how does the copier work, to I need this 1973 copy of an article from this local newspaper, and I need it as a PDF, not just the text. We're hopeful that we can help with all of that. So peer supporters are open-minded, and librarians, 95% of the librarians I've encountered are very open-minded. About 90% of the peer supporters I've encountered are open-minded, which is pretty good. Could always be better, but it's pretty good. We all accept diversity and the right to knowledge, help, and information of any type. And we all strive to serve everyone equally and equitably, no matter the difference, whether it's learning style, gender expression, age, ability, nationality, you name it. And peer specialists also, and we strive or should strive to learn from each interaction with differences, to learn new skills and ideas to better serve current and future people we work with. I learn something every time I interact with someone, whether it's a patron or a peer, and I try to use that, and I find myself using that in my future interactions when I encounter a similar situation. It's just life experience, and drawing on it, not just relying on book knowledge, but real life experiences and knowledge, I find really helps. And in both, and peer supporters and librarians respect the person's right to choose. It's, what, again, whether I'm working with a peer or with a patron, whether I'm a peer specialist or a librarian, I am, and we all are really enabling the person to choose how they want to proceed. We're being person-centered. We're really focusing on letting the person take the wheel. We're not trying to force it down their throat, whether it's, this is the information you need, and this is the source that you have to take it from. And I hate when faculty put in their syllabi, you must use 2 articles from this journal in print and 3 articles from a book. And the book must be in print. And then 2 articles that are online. You guys ever encounter that?
It is so true. Yes, sometimes I do get frustrated because no matter how I feel, I have to follow what the faculty member says. There is no if and but. That's the base of that's the base going to go. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
If I can add to that, the better time, what I find it kind of funny when I find a faculty member suggesting a certain journal and they don't do the work behind, not realizing that it's not even subscribed to the library. So now you're asking the students to go basically purchase this article or like get it through interlibrary loan. And, it's a whole mess when they're being so stringent on the source that they need to use.
Definitely. It's very frustrating, and we can respect the person's right to choose, but within the guidelines that their instructor or whatever has given them. So unfortunately, sometimes they're stuck, and that's when empathy and really feeling with them and sharing their frustration without bad mouthing the faculty, but saying, yeah, I've had situations like this too. Let's see what we can do to make it work for you. Works much better than, okay, well, in that case, use this article, and this article, at least giving them some options or letting them take the wheel in picking or navigating, gives them ownership and really helps them to have had a better experience. And yes, some resent us and just want us to hand it to them. That's not who I am. So working on it. But, if that's what the patron wants, that they really do want to proceed or they want it to be done for them, based on the guidelines of the library I'm working in at the time, I do it to the best of my ability without going against what the guidelines are. So I won't just hand them the article, but I'll do it and talk them through, and I'll talk aloud as I do the entire thing for them and make them listen. And whether or not they listen, at least I tried. So that's about, I try to be as open-minded as I can while still filling the needs that, guidelines and requirements and personal beliefs want me to do. And I know roaming reference, virtual reference, that's all becoming a lot more common now. And we try to connect with the users where they are, and not only physically, such as roaming and virtual reference, but where they are on their path to knowledge. Getting a sense of, have you used databases before? What databases have you used? What searches have you done? Trying to see what level the class is. Is this for a class? Is this for a publication? Is this for personal knowledge? Because that helps know what type of source you're going to. And I know a lot of this is basic reference interview, but I can't tell you how many times I personally have fallen into the trap of not doing that and the patron getting frustrated. So I try to remember to see where they are on their path before I try to help them, because it makes it calmer for me and calmer for them, which makes it a better interaction and they're more likely to come back. So and also just not waiting for people to come to us, but also I'll walk around the library every 15 minutes or so if I'm not helping someone, and just be visible. I'll go up and start fixing the stacks or just walk around pushing in chairs. And I can't tell you how many more questions I get doing that than I do sitting at the desk. It's either they're not comfortable walking up to the desk, or they just, oh yeah, you work here, let me ask you a question. Or I don't know why, but they're more likely to ask me questions when I'm out and about than I am behind the desk. So I try to make sure to take my, as I call them, my regular strolls to get my steps in. I don't know if all of you have found that also, that going to where they are kind of helps to get more questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very universal where patrons are quote unquote like scared to come to the desk because it can be an intimidating, atmosphere. You have someone behind that screen, right? That is this supposedly like all-knowing, wise sage of a scholar. But when you are on the floor, and even if it's just kind of like walking around putting books away, you kind of humanize yourself, and the point that people are more comfortable with asking questions.
Definitely. And most importantly, we don't judge anyone's questions or anything. In both cases, working as a peer specialist or peer supporter, I've gotten a lot more awareness of differing abilities and different contexts, and it's really helped me in the library. When I see a patron, I can sometimes now sense when a patron is getting frustrated at something, and I'll just, happen to be pushing in chairs right around them to see if I can help them, see if they're going to reach out to me because I'm right there. Or I'll be shelving books right by where they are and see if they're going to come to me. Not saying we all need to be like that, but it does help to be able to like zone in on that. And sometimes if I'm actually in the middle of something and I'm picking up on it, I might try to get another library staff member to head over to help the patron so that they're not left alone if I can't stop what I'm doing. So sometimes just being able to pick up on that really helps. And again, that's where, peer specialists can come in the library. If you have the patron who's getting frustrated, peer specialists can sit with them and talk with them and try to de-escalate the situation, not specifically about, finding what they need, but at least calming down, addressing the actual what's going on, and then warm handoff back to you to get help with the actual research question. Whether it's, oh, I'm so frustrated, the librarian's not getting my understanding what question I'm asking, and I'm so frustrated, and I don't understand any of this, and I want to quit. That's more of where, for me, my peer specialist hat would come on. Or again, if I'm busy, I'll talk to them. I'm not going to just leave them, but I might also make a referral to the counseling center. Thankfully, we have the number of the counseling center on, and we can call them at any time to come down because we're having a issue with a patron. But, having a peer specialist who's not, I guess, counselor and not a library staff, but a peer, can help with just someone else to talk to calm down, to then be able to figure out how to ask what you need. So that is another thing. So peer supporters are empathetic, and as librarians, we try to be as well, especially through effective listening skills. For us, an effective reference interview. I know we can't always do it, but trying. and effective listening, motivational interviewing. These are all things that I've learned unofficially as a librarian. It wasn't actually directly taught when I was in library school. But as a peer specialist in my training, I was like, oh, this is like the reference interview, but this is a lot more in depth with a lot more theory and understanding of why and how and when to do it. So I've noticed that my interactions with patrons have become better since I did my training as a peer specialist. Showing that I'm listening, reflecting, repeating, clarifying body language, and being aware of my jargon, because like everyone else, I'm used to the language I speak, and I forget that I sometimes have to change it depending on who I'm talking to. So that's somewhere else that it really came in handy. Peer supporters are respectful. Again, I think all of these are pretty much self-explanatory, both as a librarian and as a peer specialist. Respecting of culture, exploring how differences contribute. Maybe that's not so much as a librarian, but it does help in understanding why this article appeals to me more than that article, or why maybe focusing my topic a little differently might get me articles that don't get me so angsty. If I'm doing, especially if I'm doing one of the controversial topics. Practicing patience, kindness, warmth, dignity, and especially in the library, as mentioned, I think by Jeffrey, it's intimidating to come up. It's like you're giving up some of your dignity by asking for help. Especially when I was younger, working at the reference desk, older students didn't seem drawn to me because I was younger, and it was a little weird, I guess. Not for all of them, but for some of them. Or when I was female, males weren't so comfortable coming up to me. Now, depending on how I dress, I either get males or females coming up to me more. Depends how I'm presenting that day. And I'm realizing that. And I'm realizing that we're, treating people no matter what with dignity, using the right pronouns, or asking their pronouns really helps. And I know I've been talking
Can
a
I
lot.
ask a question?
Sure.
I mean, it's a very interesting concept that you're giving. I never heard of this, title before. So I used to work at a 2-year college in Bayside, Queens, part of CUNY, Queensboro Community College, where at the reference desk, I was adjunct librarian reference. And the question that I was getting there was very similar to question that people get at public library. Hardly any question related to academic. People were asking, oh, can you help me with my green card application? Can you mean social security application? Older people coming in social security. People, oh, can you suggest some resources? I don't have a green card. Various other type, totally unrelated. So now my question is, do you think, right? Do you think if a library, community college library, or any other library, 4-year, 2-year, or any, if they have someone, if peer specialist as one of the staff member, would that help like that?
Yes and no. It might not be specifically a peer specialist. I know public libraries more and more are having a social worker available, especially in the areas with more homeless people or more but having someone who's whether it's a peer specialist or someone else who is specific to that, even if it's there, we have a green card, like I know during tax season, all the public libraries around me have tax help during certain hours. So being able to say on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays from 3 to 6, we have someone here to help with green card and immigration questions. And on Thursdays from 2 to 9, we have someone who can help you with passports and job applications. You know, maybe talking with other offices on campus and seeing if one of their staff might be interested in sitting in our space for part of the time, and then reciprocally, maybe we could go sit in their spaces for when they get reference questions. Like, I know in our library, the tutors are in one half of the library. And it's kind of like when I walk around the tutoring center, the tutors will say to me, "Hey, you're the librarian. Can you help us with this?" And pass the student off to me, because the tutor has built the relationship with the student. So if you don't know where to go with a question, the library is a place you would go. And it's like, do we just send them off to another place, or do we ask that place, do they want to come there, or how do we want to do it together? I'm not sure if that answers the question.
For answering, I mean, I found it very helpful. And, but I do see now, and you might have seen this also, that is many libraries, they bringing in their tutoring centers and other offices inside the library. So it seems like library might become a hub of all the information that the student need. So that maybe getting your idea, because nobody heard of this, maybe this also help. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for the question. Another thing is that while there's a lot of special offices that handle everything, sometimes you just don't know that you have a question, or sometimes it's just without, you get a sense that, there's someone who needs some help, but you're not sure what. And that's where a peer specialist might come in, because they might be able to help the person figure out what resource do they need to get in order to help them. And then they can help the person decide which, I guess, office or desk to go to, rather than being jumped from desk to desk to desk. Because as you jump someone, no, you have to go to that desk. No, you have to go to that desk. At some point, you're going to lose them, because people don't like being bounced around. I don't like being bounced around at the DMV. And they do it to me all the time. I'm sure you've all been bounced at the DMV from this counter to that counter. Not a fun experience, is it? Especially when there are lines. So I guess I'm not sure if it's a peer specialist that should come in or what, but some type of navigator to help people figure out where to go to get help. And it's not someone who's behind a desk with a title and a computer and a formal thing, but someone more informal, maybe sitting at a table, with chairs on either side where you're at the same height, and maybe the computer's a little more off to the side and you're approachable. It's more like, I'm not sure exactly how to make it, but something more approachable, where people feel more comfortable coming up to that person, not the person behind the desk with the title. So I'm not sure exactly what that's called. But something, maybe someone they've seen in their classrooms or seen sitting in the student cafeteria. When I worked at colleges where there was a student cafeteria and a staff cafeteria, I tried to sit in the student cafeteria sometimes, just so I would be seen and students would recognize me. Of course, that meant sometimes my lunch was interrupted, but that was okay. At least I was reaching people. So, not saying that everyone needs to give up their lunch hour, but it was something that helped me to make some connections. So it's really trying to figure out how to be a peer while also being a professional. And for peer specialists, that's a very difficult line also. And for librarians, it's even more difficult. And I know that because our role is very different. So peer supporters facilitate change. And as librarians, we do that also on a different level. But book banning, I think that's all I need to say right now. Book banning. I know AI is very big in SUNY right now, and ChatGPT. I know we're getting a lot of training and sharing about that, and being aware of that, being aware of how to support and facilitate change, being sure that we're using language that's appropriate, supportive, respectful, helping people explore areas and explore for themselves how to change for themselves. Someone who always uses Wikipedia as their only source, showing them how other sources might also be similar to Wikipedia so that they're more comfortable, and trying to encourage them to change to something that's more accepted by their instructor or professor. Working with people to change, to facilitate change, to understand, working with faculty to understand that not everyone has computers with high-speed internet and printers at home. So you can't ask them to print out every journal that they use in their article. You can just ask them to give you the citation and find it yourself, or have them email it or something. I remember faculty members insisting that the students attach printouts of every article they used. And that was expensive. And we had all the students coming into the library to print because they couldn't do it at home. And it was frustrating for everyone. So little things like that. In the library I'm in now, we try to do a lot of DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. Our college is very big on that, very supportive of that. And we try to do displays, make sure we have books, raise awareness of what we have about diversity, and making sure everyone feels included. So that's also something that we work hard on. Less so for librarians about being honest and direct, but as much as we can while still being polite and professional. Peer supporters are not always quite as, well, at least my peer specialist is very direct and honest with me, but then again, I asked her to be. Probably more so with me than with others. She's more gentle with others. But always respecting privacy and confidentiality of everyone, whether it's FERPA, HIPAA, or just general common courtesy. If I see someone feels uncomfortable because the person behind them is too close, I might say to them, why don't we go walk over to a computer to work together?
You have, excuse me, you have 10 more minutes. So.
Okay, thanks. Perfect.
Okay.
And so on. So that's pretty general. Peer support is mutual and reciprocal. And that was one of the main things I've been talking about, is if you can make the interaction with the patron more mutual and reciprocal, letting them know that they helped you learn something, letting them help you with something, even if I know how to do everything, I might try to get the patron to teach me how to do something, just because if they've helped me, they're more likely to accept help from me, to make it more of a give and take. And that's something I've really picked up during being a peer specialist, is if I let them feel like they're helping me, they're more likely to accept help. Equal with that is equally shared power. In the library, it's not always equally shared power, but trying to make it more even. Well, again, whether it's with a student or a faculty member, trying to make it more equal really enhances the interaction. And being strengths focused, focusing on where the person's strengths are, specifically in determining what types of resources to use. If you have choices, like, do you want to go for the higher level articles? Do you want to go for the shorter articles? Do you want to go for books? Do you want to go for something that has audio? Do you want to be more cognizant that the database has a very good integrated audio, translation, anything like that? Being transparent, that's super important, both as a librarian, as a peer specialist. Being upfront, yes, I can help you find resources, but I cannot do it for you, is one of my biggest ones that I say to any patron, that I will help them, but I won't do it for them. And trying to be a professional, but also a human, is one of the big things. And being person driven, letting the person have options and grow and encourage and support, not being that sage on the stage, but trying to be a guide on the side or a supporter, is another big one. And with that, I will open up for questions, comments. Please give me criticisms. I love criticisms because that's how I learn.
Well, thank you so much, Sine, for a wonderful presentation and something I did not know of, something that I think very beneficial to many libraries, regardless of their, affiliation to college, university, or medical school, whatever. I have a question for you. You rightly pointed out, so, um, you know, I have not seen the budget situation for the library is always a struggle, right? No matter who's the governor, no matter who the mayor is, always, cutting funding, right? So do you think, even in this budget climate, how would it be possible to hire either part-time or full-time peer specialist? I think it's a wonderful idea. I mean, a lot of, so for me, instead of answering a research question, I answer those questions, so I would spend my time doing other thing and somebody else handle that. So my question is, how do you think, how practical this idea is given the budget constraint?
I think that it's not specifically the library hiring the peer specialist, but maybe in conjunction with the wellness departments or the advising departments or the health department or something like that, saying, we could really use someone here who has these skills, or, but we don't need them full time. Maybe we could split them and they could also be a shelver or a college assistant, so that when they're not, or they can be be a circulation assistant who also has these skills, that when we need them, we can use them for that. But when they're not needed, they can be helping us out with other aspects. And I know that becomes where do you assign them and how do you pay them and all those other issues.
Yes, thank you. Yes. Any other question people have?
I have one question based on like the need to change and facilitate. There, you've mentioned like the training of like AI and like GPT, and like it's a very hot conversation right now in libraries. I want to bring it to like, where do you think the training, does that training belong? Like, how would you navigate those librarians that don't want to adapt to change or new emerging technologies, or even like a chat reference situation?
Oh, that's a whole nother topic.
Sure. Sorry, I felt like I
that-
was open to
That's okay.
on that one.
That's okay. It's change management, diffusions of innovation. And for the reluctant ones, the best thing is to try to get their buy-in. So rather than saying you have to do this, trying to find some aspect of it that appeals to something that they find problematic. So why am I always getting the same 5 students coming up to me? You know, when I'm doing the chat, I'm getting all these different students and I'm getting some really interesting questions, not the same old questions all the time. Maybe you'd like to try 1 or 2 of them with me and getting them in that way.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. A wonderful presentation. I'm happy to have been here for this.
Thank you.
3 minutes remaining. Any other question? Well, thank you so much. And that's a wonderful presentation. As you know, this presentation will be published in Urban Library Journal as a conference proceeding. So that's so more people get idea when they read. And it will become part of academic works here at CUNY. Okay. So that's a wonderful thing that we have. If you want to spread word at SUNY Schenectady that this conference is very unique, we publish this proceeding on our peer review journal, okay, Urban Library Journal, okay.